The Southern Aroostook Agricultural Museum's mission is to collect and preserve the history, the culture, and the traditions of the Aroostook County farm families. There had been a group of farmers or farm-connected folks in the area that for a long time had been looking for a way to start a museum. And they could see that with technology and changes that things were slipping away. And they wanted to become stewards of the way things used to be. The Maine Community Foundation is a great resource that supports historical, cultural, and educational projects. The potato baskets were made by local Native Americans, and so we were approached by Richard Sillaboy. He said, I would like to make the world's largest potato picking basket for you folks. So we applied to the Maine Community Foundations, and they financed the entire project.
Hi, I'm Karen Donato, and welcome to Littleton, Maine and the Southern Aroostook Agriculture Museum. We've been collecting items from the farming communities in Aroostook since 2002. We occupy the former Littleton School.
Back in 1991, a few of us got together, Francis and Charles and I, and along with another group of people, Pat Coble, J. Thomas Fitzpatrick, John Fleming, Ralph Longstaff, John Moores, Frank Pelletier, Charles Up, and to discuss about all the artifacts leaving the county, and we needed a place to collect them and save them. And for the next, 9 or 10 years, we tried to come up with something in that 9 or 10 years, and finally this school closed in '99, and the town had a special town meeting in 2001 in June. And at that time, Charles and Francis and I got together and decided this was now or never. So we had Francis represent us that night at the town meeting, and you can tell them what happened after this.
These are my two friends, so they send me to the Littleton Select Board to barter for a school building that we all knew the price was $50,000, because that's what the board had put on it for a price. But there was two other parties that wanted it at the same time, and one was turn this building into a boys' home for boys, and the other company, they were selling surplus items, building supplies and whatever, and they wanted it, but they didn't want to pay any big money until just a little bit each year for 5 years, and then a balloon payment. So I gave the pitch here that it would be ideal for a museum, and we was starting to build some pretty good momentum and some interest from the locals and what and how we were going to do it. We were going to salvage as many of the artifacts that people had used and worked with here over their lifetimes. So yes, we got they granted it to us, and we didn't have the money, and they gave us 1 year to come up with the money. So a year later, they got the money from the bank, and we didn't have much to pay with them to pay it back, but it did work. I'm thinking we went maybe 3 years to burn the mortgage.
Yeah, it was 3.5, I think. I
Yeah.
think we went a year without making any payments.
Correct.
And we paid just the interest, and then it was a 1.5 or 2 years later, I think.
Isn't that so? But it was I didn't personally was not here myself. I was out of town at that time. But when I came back, it was all paid for totally. The bank was happy, and the mortgage had got burned on the stage.
Yeah, we had Cedric Shaw was one of the people to help with burning, and my mother was the other one, Dot Campbell. And to get back before we started our museum, once we got the year to come up with the money, there was a list of people that I like to read. They all helped us on the start. We all kicked in $75 because we didn't have any money, so we kicked in $75 to get paperwork done. And another thing, we told our lawyer, which was Phil Jordan, what we was doing. He said we're crazy, but he said if you're going to work for nothing, I'll work for nothing.
That's correct.
But anyway, Charles Upton, Richard Corey, Francis Fitzpatrick, John Fleming, Max Lenz, Terry Nason, Leland Longstaff, Ralph Longstaff, Tommy McAfee, Roscoe Tingley, Albert Williams, Colby Shaw, and myself, Barry Campbell, all kicked in $75 to try to get her off the ground. Pay the light bill. So anyway, and then, like, we had a year to come up with the money, but we didn't have it, so we had to go see our banker.
And I was one of the beginning persons that worked to put this Southern Rustic Agricultural Museum together, along with Barry Campbell and Charles Upton. And we probably spent the most time, the three of us, deciding how we were going to do this and where we could go. And we did, at that point in time, we did not have a building. And there was a barn at the bird farm, which is the Fulton High School area. And we contemplated on it and looked it all over, and even bought a fellow who used to live up here that moved buildings down in Ellsworth, Dusty Haslam. And he came up and looked it over, and the biggest problem there was it had to be moved off its present location because it was too close to the school. But then where do we go with it, and security and all, we had moved it to the other end of that piece of ground. Security probably would have been more of a problem. So we kept meeting and talking, and Charles was working for the town of Holton at that time for in the Economic Development Division. So Charles was, he spent a lot of time beating this around with us and asking questions and ideas. So we moved along for how many years?
Well, we were 10 years, pretty near 10 years before this building come up for sale. And the town of Littleton wanted to sell it, and there was one company, C&C Salvage, wanted to buy it with a small payment down and a big balloon payment in the end. And another person wanted to make a boys' home out of it. And we asked the town if they'd give us a year to come up with the 50,000. And the townspeople elected for us to wait a year and see if we'd come up with the 50,000. And at the end of the year, we didn't have much money saved, did we, Francis?
No, we did not.
So we had to go see our banker, and he was a pretty good feller. He let us have the money, and we told him we didn't really want a payment book, but we would try to pay the interest if we didn't have any money. And the first year or two, it was pretty slim pickings, but we survived.
Because that's when we got started. Once we got in here, we did rent a room across the way here, because it was a big open space, but we had to heat it, keep the heat on. But we did rent that space to a church, a group that was looking for some room, and we beat around some other ideas of how to bring in some money, and it just wasn't happening. And then probably the first thing to give us some income was the suppers. When they started putting the suppers on, then we got a great response with that. And with that response, you didn't just get money for the suppers. People would come and say, well, I kind of like what you're doing, and they would leave us some money. And there's been some pretty substantial donations just because people are happy to see what's happening here. And I think everybody that's worked around here should be proud of it, because, you know, we've gone 20 years and we seem to have our oars in the water here now. Things are it moves along. And at the same time, we didn't have very much to put in a building. So we kept asking people what they had or what were they going to do with some of their artifacts. Barry and I probably had collected the most. We had them stored in our areas. One of the first items we got was the John Deere MT tractor. And for our age group, that was part of the agriculture program at Holton High School. And then that had ended, and the tractor was just sitting over in what is now the Seeds Region 2 building. And I was following it along, and I thought, well, something's going to happen. If we could get that, that would be a great piece, because a number of people can familiarize themselves in the area with that tractor. And I went to the school board, and I presented what I would like to do with it, and the answer came pretty quick from the chairman. He said, listen, we got a lot more problems here than a tractor. You go take the tractor and do what you're going to do with it. And so that opened the gate. So we took that tractor, and I kept it in my barn for probably 4 or 5 years, because we really didn't have a museum. But we got it painted down in Region 2, and it's with us today. So that's the way this project has come together. Most people have said, well, we like what you're doing. And they pulled their pocketbooks out and really supported us.
And then we built a barn, and because we decided we needed a place to put some of the tractors and the bigger equipment. And by the time we had the barn built, we had collected enough stuff to fill the barn.
Yes, we had. And that is probably one of the last barn raisings that was taking place. And we advertised a little and talked and said what we were going to do. And there's some pictures here of people that participated. And the women had a big meal for us, a coffee break, and then brought us in here and fed us
Fed us
a large
really
dinner. And then they came out in the afternoon with coffee and whatever, and but there was a large number of people
Yeah.
who participated in that. That barn went up fast.
Yeah, we built the barn basically in 5 Saturdays. And there was anywhere to 18 to 20 people every Saturday, not counting the cooks.
Yeah.
And they helped too.
Yeah.
And there was a total of 51 or 2 people worked on the barn. Some worked a week or so, some worked every week. It was all volunteer.
Nobody got paid.
Cub Moores was our head
He was
carpenter.
our head carpenter, head engineer, and
Yeah.
really, it just
He
went
kept us
together.
all busy.
No, it was, it's the way that project should have went. It was, and we needed it. People might ask, well, where's Joe's Diner? Well, Joe's Diner used to be a car dealership up in, across from the Catholic Church on Military Street. We didn't have any to start with. And.
Well, we started with the $75 a piece, everybody kicked in.
Right.
So we had that times 13. And times were slim, because every meeting we would wonder how we're gonna pay the light bill and the fuel bill, but there's always something worked out. We rented the building too, and, you know, we'd be right down to the bottom, just scratching the bottom, and somebody would rent it and would give us a little more money, and then we made we had 2 raffles a year. A lawnmower in the spring and a gun in the fall, and we did fairly well on that. Memberships was a big thing, and a lot of people were real generous. And rentals, raffles, it took everything to make it work, and volunteers. We had great volunteers.
I think we got into the raffle bit, and it's been very, very good to us. But I think, if I'm saying this right, I think the gun that I won, and I think that was our first raffle, because we were scheming how to make some money. And just a little tidbit, I was in Marsville and Ashley Potatoes, and this fella came in, and he was a former retired farmer, and he was having a hunter's breakfast, and he wanted some potatoes to cook. So we took care of him, and he turned to me, and as I say, he was no salesman, but he said, would you want to buy a ticket on a gun? I said, so his tickets were $1 each, or 6 for $5, and big-hearted me bought 1 ticket for $1, and 2 or 3 months later, I guess, my wife got a call and said, well, your husband won a nice gun. So I come down with the gun, and it was I think 306, 306, wasn't it?
Yeah.
With a scope and all, and a nice case, and I said to Charles Upton, I said, well, what are we gonna do with the gun? And he said, well, we can't have any guns in here. He said, that's the reason people break in. He's very adamant about it. So we have probably everything in here but a gun. And that's all right. Charles I think we were right, we listened to him. But we sold the tickets for $10 each, and that's what we still do today. We have a very good participation. So how many do we sell now?
We sell 550 tickets
Okay.
On the lawnmower and 550 on the gun.
On the gun.
And I think Charlie Johnson seems like he had a shotgun one year too, that it was like brand new, and he donated it to us.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was the same year we sold yours, or it might have been the next year.
Well, I think we found out that worked for us.
Yeah,
Because
everybody
a
needs
number of
another
people
gun.
wanted a gun. Yeah.
But we've done real good. We've had a lot of projects over the years. We put in a new furnace downstairs for the north end, and then a different year we put one in for the museum part. And we also did a snow building
Uh,
along with
yes,
Gale and Cole, donate some money toward that.
to back up and tell about the reason we put the hot air furnace in the article section, which is from the office down, there's doors. I happened to be in Florida and didn't get involved till I come back. It was all cleaned up, but this was a hot water system, and it was old and
Steam.
steam, and the whole area got steamed down there. And as I say, I was away. When I come back, they all tell me how hard damn they had to work
Yeah.
to dry it all out, wipe everything down. And there's a few remnants you can see where a few pieces got damaged, but come out of it very well, really.
Very well for the
And that's the last thing we wanted to have happen here. So we talked about how we fix that. So we cut them pipes right off, and it's strictly a hot air system now. So there's no more water down in that area. So we've had some challenges, but we've always been able to overcome, keep going.
My grandmother, Dot Campbell, was a registered nurse, and she retired when she was 62. And after that, she kept busy helping her neighbors and friends, giving people rides, cooking, volunteering. She was busy with her church. And then she started putting together some family genealogies. And so she would go and visit with family members, extended family. She'd track people down, and she'd go and visit, and she'd get pictures, and she'd talk to them, and then she'd go make copies of the pictures, and then she'd get to visit them again when she returned the pictures. And she just loved connecting with people, and she liked to hear their stories and figure out how everybody was connected. And it was like a puzzle for her to solve, and she just really enjoyed putting those together. And so she put extensive family genealogies together on both sides of her family, both sides of my grandfather's family. Then she did some local history. She did a history of the Littleton schools and the churches in Littleton and the town of Littleton. And so she spent a lot of time putting histories together and visiting places and talking to people. And she was a historian at heart. And so when the Southern Rustic Agricultural Museum started, she was right there from the beginning, helping in whatever way she could. She came out and she would clean and paint, and she would these pictures, I mean, these tell the story. There was nothing too dirty for her to do, too hard. It didn't matter what it was. She just loved to be here and loved to be helping. She'd get right down in the dirtiest of jobs, and she'd help clean, and be dirty and dusty and grimy, and she'd get them all polished up and ready, and she'd help with the cataloging and making tags and whatever needed to be done. She just was out here helping with whatever she could help with. And the other thing that she really did and loved to do was to take pictures and document everything that was happening. And all the pictures that you see here, all down the halls of the Southern Rustic Agricultural Museum, a lot of those, most of those she took. She was always here, no matter when it was or what was happening. She wanted to be here to get pictures of everybody who was helping, whether they helped for a couple hours or a week. She was going to get a picture. And my dad was telling me one time, when they put the sign out, it was about 15 degrees in the middle of winter, and it was so cold. They'd work for a little bit, then they'd work for 20 minutes or so, and then they'd have to get back in their pickup to warm up their hands. And wouldn't you know it, my grandmother is right there in her car waiting and taking pictures, and we've got pictures of that farther down the hall. And she'd get back in her car and warm up. But she was there to document everything. History was really important to her, preserving the past and preserving the present that would become the past. So just everything, she wanted to get pictures of everything and everybody, and she just loved being out here. She would pack her lunch and come out and spend the day working at the museum, whether it was in the museum or around the grounds, whatever needed to be done. And or if the guys were going to be here working on a building project, she'd be out here. She and Lois Elliott spent a lot of time out here together, and she'd come out and make them lunch and help in whatever way she could, and of course take pictures. My grandmother loved volunteering at events. Didn't matter what the event was, she wanted to be here, helping out with however she could. But mostly she liked to give tours because she loved talking about how things were when she was growing up. She liked to share, whether it was how they used to make butter or the sewing or what life was like. She loved talking to people and letting them know, what things were used for, and giving tours through the museum. And she was a hard worker, and everybody, I think, appreciated that about my grandmother, how hard she worked and how much she loved this museum and everything that it was setting out to accomplish. And she'd come to the meeting. She wouldn't miss a meeting. She'd come, and my dad was telling me one day she came and she had a list of things for him to do that she was going to need shelves put up or things like that so she could get her part done. And Colby starts laughing because Dad gets a big list of to-dos, and she said, "Well, don't laugh, I have one for you too." And that was just her way. And there's nothing anybody, they'd do anything for her because she was there working just as hard as the rest of them. So here are the pictures of the day they put up the sign out front. It was about 15 degrees, and they came and took turns putting it up and getting into the vehicle to warm up their hands. And my grandmother had to be right there helping get the pictures for that. And she documented the whole thing, and she'd hop in her car and warm up a little bit. But it was really important to her to always get pictures of everybody who was there and helping. And occasionally, somebody would get a picture of her. She always liked to volunteer and help with the suppers.
My name is Ray Johnston. Been a volunteer here since the place was purchased and beginning to go from a school to a museum. And met an awful lot of nice people and had a lot of fun doing it. This winter's project has been an old scrapbook. Elaine Duff, who was married to Gerald, apparently this is what she did. She cut out of all the newspapers anything newsworthy and of interest to the area. And we have 15 scrapbooks from probably 1995 and up through until now. And we've taken everything, and we're going to do the last part since the town has purchased, or the boys have purchased this museum. This was our Littleton's final PTC fair. We used to have fairs with the kids every spring. Dana Wright is right here as the first king of it, with the last king right here. And they had cakewalks and fish ponds and all through the school. And my husband Charlie won Mr. Littleton at one time, clowning around as usual. But from here it's going on. This is all on the museum, some with our bridge that we'll have in here. And one night we'll have a chance to set these scrapbooks out so that people can look through them. I know you'll be fascinated with them. We have been just getting them fixed up and ready. So we'll plan on that during our suppers some evening. Okay, This is our gym, and they have left this exactly the way it was when all these children went to school here. All 6 of mine all went right through all the grades right here. And I was glad when they redid the floor over, they left the basketball markers and their big scroll here in the middle. The hoops are still there, kind of high now, but they are still here. Show that it was a gym and it's being used a lot. We have our suppers out here once a month or 10 months of the year, and have wonderful crowds and wonderful people to work with. This is a stage, well, for all the kids and all the activities for the school, but we also used to do fairs for the children in the spring. And for a couple of years, friends of mine in our age group, we put on an old-fashioned school one year and used, you might not remember them, Tristan Hoover and Priscilla and Ivan Hoover and Mabel, as school children. We got into some fun activities with that. And then another year we did a mock wedding. And Tristan, over 6 feet tall, was the bride, and Priscilla was the groom. And it involved an awful lot of people. We packed this gym. That happened before all the kids' activities at the separate rooms. They used to have a set of steps right here for the children to get up onto the stage. And we use that for our plays too. And Charlie and I were in it. He was the bad kid in the school. He was going to get a licking one time, and Tristan had him lean over the desk so that he could get he's going to get a meeting before the school was out anyway, so we might as well get it now first thing and get it over with. And Carol Swim was sitting in the Dutch chair, and when he leaned over that desk, the leg came out of that desk, shot right out across here. The stool came out here. Kids were sitting on the floor in the front. There were so many. Everybody in the audience thought it was supposed to happen that way, and it was not. Water was flying from the flowers we had for the teacher, had an ample with a pipe cleaner in it for the worm. That went rolling down front. The kids were in hysterics, and we gathered our wits and put it back together again and finished, but that was quite a fun day. We've had a lot of those fun days here. This is pictures of the original cooks in the kitchen, Frank McCordick and Ruth McCordick and Marion Gentle, 1957. And the cupboards are exactly the same. They must have been some well-built cupboards, because after 70 years they're still here and we're still using them. And they're not falling off the walls yet. They're still right up there. And we all love it. It's a museum piece in itself to me, because it is 70 years old and it's still very easy to work in. This is our kitchen. We do have a cooler, which they probably didn't have back then, but it's the original cupboards all the way along. Oh, we do have a dishwasher now, but we have all the sinks. We have a marvelous big stove, and that enables us to be able to serve 120 and 150 and 200 people at the same time for that stove. But plenty of room, awful good crews, had wonderful people to work with.
Hello there. We want to welcome you to the Southern Aroostook Agricultural Museum this afternoon, and I will be your guide for the next few minutes while we tour this portion of it, and I'm Thelma Henderson. We want you to notice this particular entrance to the old house, and it is indicative of just the roof, and we want you to take particular notice of the screen door, which was so necessary in those days when it came to all of the insects and the flies and so forth and so on. So we're going in now into the old house. I want you to take particular notice of this Hoosier that was donated, and it was in excellent condition, and it was just such a novelty because it was like your cooking corner. And in this, you put your flour in here, in this bin up in here. It flowed down through, and then you just cranked the crank here, and it came out all sifted down as you cooked. And you had everything. You had all your spices and everything that you needed to cook right at your fingertips. And it was like a little center for your cooking, and everything was right here. And about 10 years ago, here in this portion of the museum, we had a boiler, a steam boiler explode. And it was very detrimental to, well, I say detrimental, that's not the right description. It was, but for some reason, this wood or this finish on this Hoosier was very, very affected, and it kind of blistered up all over it. So anyway, I hit it with fine sandpaper and sanded it down, and then rubbed it with a stain, and it really came out looking very good. It was very rewarding, very satisfying when we got it all done. But we did want you to make particular notice of that. Chef or chief or whatever they call it, an old stove, and I don't really know where that did come from, but that too is one of the old wood stoves. And then I want you to notice in particular this collection of salt and pepper shakers, which was donated by one of the men who was very fundamental in the organization and planning of this museum, and they belonged to his mother. And there is over 100 sets. And she was so diligent in keeping a record of where every set came from. And some of them were, people would travel abroad in those days and so forth. And they have really quite a history. So that is very, very interesting, and it's fun to just take time to look at the variety of them all. And this is a toaster. We want you to know this is how they toasted the bread on either side. You just put your slice in there and then put it in and toasted it. Yes, we're now in the dining room, and we just want you to take particular notice of this was the set of dishes was in the silverware was donated by a grandmother of Anne Longstaff and her husband Paul Stoddard of Presque Isle, and they were the ones that donated it. And it's just a very, very complete set. And we do occasionally polish our silver, and right now it's in very dire need of a polishing. But it was so, she evidently was a great hostess and a great entertainer because of having this many dishes. She must have made use of them. And it sets up a really, really beautiful table. Little utensil that they used to brush the crumbs off the tablecloth and so forth. And this was how it worked. So that was kind of novel too. We want you to note this dresser that is here, and its claim to fame was the fact that it was in an inn out in the Patton area, and what caused it to be so famous was the fact that Eleanor Roosevelt spent a night out there in that inn, and this is the dresser in the room that she slept in. And we do have a collection of vintage. This is a wedding dress, and of course this is the wedding dress over here. And we have a collection of different gowns. Some were prom gowns, and some were. This particular one, we were just commenting on it and how beautiful it is. It was worn by Jerry Dunn in the Grand March at the Elks Club one year, and it's just absolutely beautiful. I never did work one, so I'm not familiar with them. But anyway, you sat here and controlled it and put your folded sheets and so forth and so on, and ran it through this ironer. And these are all the real old. These are really old, as in, excuse me, the way that they rinse their clothes, and many times they rinse them twice. And this was your wringer that wrung them out from one to the other. And these are just a variety of washing machines of different styles and different periods of time, I suppose. Want to call your attention to the stove here. This is a very, very unique stove in the fact that it's in such excellent condition. And take notice of this copper. This is where they heated their water. Then it was a coil in these this heater here, and that your water heated in that, and then you just drained it off. Paper towels and so forth and so on. And this is a towel, and then you just wiped, and when it got dirty in one area, why you just rolled it around to where it was a little bit cleaner, so it looked better. I want you to know that this is a bathtub, and if you carried the water for very far, by the time you got it filled, you'd be ready to soak for a little while. But it's all metal, and it's a good size. It takes quite an area in, so it's unique. And this is our milk room, and because of the Holton Farms dairy being in Holton, and we're very familiar with that, why it's kind of taken on the reputation of being a Holton Farms dairy room. This is a milker, and to many, I'm sure, that are unfamiliar, maybe with even how butter is made or where it comes from. These are what you call terms along here. All they're different styles, but how you make butter is made from cream, either sweet cream or sour cream, and then it is the motion that before it turns into butter. And these are all the many different styles of the old terms, and that are interesting. This is a small one where you just run it around, and there was paddles in there that kept the cream moving until it turned into butter. And like I say, when the butter came, that's what they used to call it. When it comes, it came in a lump, which had to be removed, and then the water had to be worked out of it as much as you could. And these were the trays. These butter trays were what they used to work the butter over to get the water out of it as much as possible. This stove came in, and it had been in storage, of course, for many years, and it was kind of a sad case actually when it came in. It was rusted badly, and I suppose in its origination it was totally a wood stove. However, they converted it into oil, and in later years. But all I could think of is, while I was working on it, was the fact that, can you think how excited the lady of the house must have been when that was delivered to her home? Because it was just really such a unique utensil or item or whatever. And when, in the process, we also found a mice nest here under one of these covers. We had to vacuum it out. Well, these are the most interesting. It's called Maine Automobile Road Book, and it evidently was published in 1917. And it was, of course, before paved roads were in here, but they did have different routes, and it would give you these explanations. Bear left at Fork, across Long Bridge over Merrimack River. This is down in Concord, New Hampshire, and turn sharp right at opposite end and follow along the bank of the river. Keep straight on where tracks turn right. And some of them, that isn't as interesting as some of them were. Some of them were the description that said when you come to, they didn't call it an intersection, but that is basically what evidently they were talking about. And it said, please do not, I don't know whether it said blow your horn or toot your horn or whatever, but because of the horses, it will alarm them. So they're just so fascinating, and I don't know who was donated by, but it's certainly an interesting read to just every once in a while look at one.
My name is Richard Syllaboy. I'm Vice Chief of the Aroostook Band of Micmacs. I always went to the woods with the boys to cut ash and carry it out from the time that I was 8, 9 years old until I was 13 when I moved out. Very few of our people, the Micmac people, were basket makers, and they were all older. It is the oldest art in the Northeast, you know, almost as old as the birch bark. You know, I'm proud of the work.
My grandmother, Dot Campbell, was a volunteer here at the Southern Aroostook Agricultural Museum. This display is set up in her honor. She was a registered nurse, and this cape and hat is what she would wear. She got the cape when she graduated, and then she went to work at the Aroostook General Hospital, where she spent most of her career. She was a nurse for around 40 years. And my aunt was telling me when she was growing up, when she and my father were in grade school, she remembers a lot of evenings that Grandma would come home late. She would, in addition to the work at the hospital, she was a district nurse, so that's kind of like a visiting nurse. And so she would stop and see people who needed nursing on the way home. So she often got home quite late, and it was expensive to have a nurse in your home. She was telling me it was like $7 a day. And so a lot of times Grandma got paid in homemade goodies. She got paid with cookies or pickles or mincemeat or loaves of sweetbread. And my aunt was just remembering how she didn't do it for the money. She did it because she loved people and she cared about people, and she just had a heart to serve in that way. And my father remembers her being the first one to always go if someone in the family needed help or needed nursing, or somebody was sick. Grandma was the first one out the door to go and to help, and she really loved being a nurse and taking care of people and helping people, and she just had a heart to serve.
I'm Joe Inman, this is Dee Cote, and we're here today to talk about the Putnam hardware wagon that was recently restored for our museum. So in 2016, Albert Putnam of Holton donated the wagon to the museum, and as you will see in some pictures that we'll have later on, the wagon was in really tough shape. In 1904, my grandfather and Al's grandfather, Fred Putnam, bought part ownership of the Turney hardware store in downtown Holton. And 4 years later, his brother Arthur Putnam joined the ownership of the store. Mr. Turney died around 1908, and so the two Putnam brothers had sole ownership of the store. The store became known as Putnam Brothers Hardware. Shortly after they took ownership of the store, they also got the franchise for Gulf Oil products for all of Aroostook County and part of New Brunswick. And as a matter of fact, they were the first, they put the first gasoline pump in Aroostook County. And that was located in front of their store in Market Square. The store is what if you're my age, remember as the Chain Apparel, and it's now H&R Block in Market Square. The part of the story. Moving on. During the restoration, we were lucky to find on the wagon, underneath all the dirt, a plaque that said Silas Tabor. And so the wagon was made by Silas Tabor. There are actually two plaques, one here and one in back. Mr. Tabor was known throughout the area for the quality of the wagons, buggies, and horse-drawn pumps. Slaves, and he made hundreds of them. He was located on Mechanic Street, and he employed quite a few people. And I think the building would be across from McPartland's, down a little on the left-hand side. Eventually, I think Hawkins blacksmith store shop was right there. So the Board of Trustees, once they received this as a gift, had a decision to make whether to leave the wagon in the original condition or to restore it. And so the decision was made to restore it, and we were very fortunate to have Dee Cote, who did 99% of the restoration. Funding for the restoration was mainly through the Putnam Charitable Trust. So we were lucky to have funding to do this. It cost, we had to send the wheels to Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania to be done because they were the ones that had the largest board.
Yeah, some of the spokes were missing and they were pretty well gone. The wheels were still round, but they were close to collapsing when we got it. When I first saw it, it was in a Peretta house, and Francis took me down to take a look at it. I looked at it, and it was pretty bad. I took a few pictures and thought, well, something I can do, but it's going to take a while to do it. And it did. I worked on it for about a year, and all the wood has been replaced except these two pieces under the seat. I had to leave some original, and that was the best two pieces I could find. Other than that, it went right down to pieces. It was here in the barn, and I'd come down and work on it. All of the metal was taken right down to the metal, and just I covered with a little oil to keep it from rusting. And I guess once they painted, once it dried, it was really pretty good. It took paint well, and it was a good project for me. The springs were the biggest challenge. They come apart in pieces naturally, and they were pretty well rusted. And I think I used like 12 wire brushes and wore them out doing that. And had a little help from my brother-in-law putting the wheels back on. And at one point, when they came back from Pennsylvania, we put them on, and the cart was sort of tilting, and we looked at it and come to find out the rear wheels are 2 inches bigger than the front ones. Once we changed them around, it rolls real easy. You just push it, and the wheels are well lubricated. It was just a good challenge for me. I enjoyed it.
When Dee had the springs taken apart, he'd noticed some writing on one of the leaves, and the name of the foundry that made the springs was stamped on the leaf of the spring.
Yeah.
And Dee's wife looked it up, and they're still in business in New York.
In New York.
In New York State.
Yeah. They make springs now for automobiles. They've been in business over 100 years.
So Dee is very modest. We were unbelievably fortunate to have Dee with his talents to do this. I'd come up quite often to check on what was going on, and he had it either up in his shop up the road or here. He'd have hundreds of pieces laid out on the floor here. It was amazing to see.
I took a lot of pictures to make sure I put it back the right way.
But just a work of art. And we have other people to thank too who were involved in the restoration.
I had a few people help me take it apart and actually lift it up to put the wheels on. So we did have some help.
Larry McCarthy did the signs on the side and donated that to us. Jamie Watson helped me with the painting of the whole wagon. And then we had other people who donated money so that we could pay for this. But it's a part of Holton's history, and we didn't say, but this is how they delivered throughout the Holton area from Putnam Hardware. So you can imagine a horse-drawn wagon pulling up through Market Square. Now this is the time when we're basically transitioning from horse-drawn to gasoline engines. We have a picture of the hardware store down in the square with dozens of horse-drawn wagons and one car. And so this is what was going on during the period. Putnam Brothers owned the hardware store from 1904, and the last date that I could find listed was about 1925, and I think they eventually moved over beyond where Volumes bookstore is, over in there. And then they built the big Gulf empire that they had for northern Maine. they got their beginnings with this wagon and with the hardware store. So.
All the wood on the wagon was bought naturally by the museum, and it's all oak. It's all white oak, and it was nice to work with. The only thing that's not oak are these two, I don't know what you call them, that go out the hook under the horse. And there were just two little pieces, stubs, when I got the wagon. So I had to almost guess as to how to do it. So what you see is what I made.
We saved a couple original parts, the sideboards here. If you visit the museum, you can see them hopefully hanging on the wall before too long. Also, Dee happens to have a forge, and so we were lucky to have a person who could fabricate some of the metal things that we had to do or do repair work.
Yeah, there were a few pieces I had to weld, and other than that, yeah, I had a little here and there.
So when we first got the wagon, it was really in bad shape, and it was filled with powder post beetle holes. If there was one, there was 100,000 on this wagon.
Yeah.
And if it hadn't been for that, we probably wouldn't have had to restore the wagon. We could have saved it, but it was beyond saving. Because
most of the wood was really, really bad.
So this came as a surprise to me. Al was my cousin, and I had no idea he had saved this wagon. And he apparently had it in one of these barns out behind his house. And then the next thing I know, look in the Pioneer Times, and here's a picture of my grandfather's wagon and his grandfather's wagon being donated to the museum.
Nice piece of history. Come up, and all you do is push it, and it's locked. Isn't that great?
Snaps right in.
Snaps right in. To hold whatever you put on it, if you put a big load on it.
You can, from the original, you can see this is really well used because the wood was worn right down. So you know a lot of lumber.
Yeah, a lot of the metal was worn too inside.
Yeah.
New ones. These four are replacement. You can tell the old ones, they're a little pitted.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, but these rails are all original. It was a good project.
Go!
My name is Richard Barker. I live in Easton, but I was born here in Holton and went to school here. I graduated from Ricker College. And I have a general store in Easton years ago that I ran for 31 years. And now I'm retired. And these are some of the toys here that I used to play with when I was a kid here in Holton. And perhaps you would like to show, I'd like to show you how these toys are used and what I used years ago. You've probably heard the expression stick in the mud. Well, this is one of the sticks that they used to play, the game stick in the mud. You had an imaginary circle, probably 3 feet in diameter, and maybe 3 or 4 kids would have a stick made out of broomstick and sharpened to a point. And each kid would take the stick and throw it and stick it in the lawn. Usually it was in the springtime when the ground was soft. And the object of the game was, as the other opponent had a stick in there, you would throw yours and try to knock it out of the ground, and yours would be sticking in the ground. Then you'd pick up your opponent's stick and you'd whack it way off, and he had to run and pick it up and come back to the circle. And while he was gone, you kept going 1, 2, 3, sticking your stick in the mud until he came back, and then you counted that, say, maybe five times, and then you keep on going around the circle, and whoever got to 21 first won the game. That's how they played stick in the mud. Of course, probably you all know about slingshots. They're made by sticks with a V shape, and you'd use, back in those days, tires had inner tubes, and you'd make a strip of the inner tube rubber, and then a little leather pouch, maybe from a tongue of an old shoe. We used to shoot rocks or marbles and have an empty tin can off at a distance and see if you could hit it with a marble or a rock. This is what we used to have during World War II, where everything was war games for kids. And this is one of the toys we had. It has a mouse trap inside there, and you load it up, pick it up here, and you have a little hook that sets a trap, and you reassemble the boat with this chimney. And it's, like I said, as the marble comes down from the stick, it hits the... This was called a button toy, and you had threaded through here with just ordinary string, and you used to pull it out, and this is here, and you pull it back and forth, and the little button would spin back and forth. Doesn't work too well here because the string isn't quite right. Winds it up. And the more you wind it, the faster it goes. This was our big telephone. It's 2 empty containers and a thread. And one person would hold this way off, and you go maybe 20 or 30 feet away, and you'd speak into the can, and the other person would hold it up to their ear, and you could actually hear this other person talking, and the sound would go through the thread, which was held taut. So that's what we used to call our telephone. This is the first piece is a machine gun, and it has notches where you put the rubber bands in each notch. Then when you pull that string cord, it will pop the elastic up out of the notch, and each would fly. And that was our machine gun. And over here is our pistol with a clothespin that holds the rubber band. And then when you open the clothespin, that lets the rubber band fly. Over here is a metal pipe, small piece section. You take that and you pound it into the ground maybe an inch or so. Then on top you take the ball and you put a firecracker down into the metal cylinder, with the fuse sticking out over the edge, and then you replace the ball on top. You'd light the fuse, bang, it would blow the ball way up, maybe 30 or 40 feet up into the air. Then you try to catch it on its way down. A piece of a shingle shaped like a boat, and then you have a little paddle, and you have a rubber band, and you'd wind up that little paddle round and round and round and round and round and round. Then you put it in a mud puddle, and the little paddle would go like this, and that would move your boat along the mud puddle. It was an arrow, made like an arrow, and we put a nail for a weight with the head going back this way, not pointed. And then we had a long stick with a string, and there's a notch in there. And you hook the string into the notch in the arrow, and with your long stick, you'd fling it like this, and that would go up in the air, and of course would come down. Similar to like throwing potatoes, little potatoes when you used to pick potatoes, and you had a stick, you'd throw the potato, only this you threw an arrow. My brother made these. My brother Elwood, he was about 4 years older than I am, and he made them, and they're made out of a round stick into a propeller blade, a small one. You pick it up with the round stick, and you rub it between your hands like this, and then you give it a quick zip, and it would fly up in the air, maybe 3 or 4 feet. And then you come down, and of course you keep doing that, and you can make it go this way, or make it go up in the air, or wherever you want to make it. A small hole in it, and it's called 3 for 1. That means if you drop your marble and it goes through the hole, whoever owns the box owes you 3 marbles, plus your own marble back. And so what you will do, you place it on the ground, and the person with the marble has to have it no lower than his waist or her waist. You try to drop the marble in that hole, which I did.
Oh my word!
Oh, I won 3 marbles and my marble back. But if it didn't go in the box, where is the marble? There's the marble. And if you want to keep trying, you could try again. It didn't go in the hole, so I lost my marble.
The members of the museum board are incredibly appreciative of longtime residents Cedric and Emily Shaw of this town. Their farm on the Framingham Road supported 3 generations of farming. As they moved into retirement age, they turned one of their barns into their own pastime museum. They cleaned up their equipment and filled their barn with a variety of farming machinery and nooks and crannies with furniture and household items pertinent to Aroostook County. They hosted friends, neighbors, and local school students. In 2002, when this building was purchased, the Shaws donated enough of their collection to fill the first 3 rooms. These rooms are known as the Shaw Collection. There are more than 1,000 items cataloged in this section alone, many with a story conveyed by Cedric. He and Emily were faithful tour guides every Thursday afternoon for many years. As we continued to create our displays, other rooms were designated for substantial donations by an individual or because of volunteer hours to build the museum. Those rooms include the Grass Tool Room, named for Luther Grass. As a long-haul truck driver, he collected tools from yard sales and flea markets from Maine to California. Within the first year of opening, he decided our museum was the place to display them. Ralph and Justina Longstaff volunteered here for more than a dozen years. He grew up on a potato farm and then owned the Hogan and Smith garage in Holton, dealing with repairs and international harvester products. He had an eye for unique items, and they will be found throughout the museum. Our museum features an old-fashioned potato house with a variety of potato bags, graters, scales, seed cutters, and potato harvesting memorabilia. Our old-fashioned house caters to the farm wife. Lots of furniture, dishes, toys, and laundry items. Many women were skilled in sewing, quilt making, embroidery, knitting, and crocheting. There are many samples of that type of work on display here. We have chosen to use the school library to feature school textbooks from earlier times. We have also acquired quite a collection of Aroostook County High School yearbooks and many things from a private high school established in Holton in 1848. Students came from many Aroostook County towns to attend Ricker Classical Institute. Later, a junior college was added, and then it transitioned to a 4-year college known as Ricker College. In the museum yard, we feature the Ross one-room school, one of a dozen in this community. It was moved here from the Ross Ridge, about 4 miles away. New buildings that have been constructed include the Carl and Helen Hagen Barn. Named for our former museum president, he and his wife spent countless hours here. Carl, a farmer and an owner of Hagen Manufacturer in New Limerick, had a skill for carpentry. He helped build the potato house room and assisted with the grass tool room. Helen was always busy in the kitchen, helping with our public suppers. Other buildings include a general store and a gas station. A barrel making area and a blacksmith shop share another building. Our most recent addition is the Allie Cole building. Allie Cole was instrumental in opening up the road from Lincoln to Aroostook County, plowing through high snowbanks for trucks to deliver goods to the county, and in return, bringing potatoes for those living south of us. We hope that you have enjoyed this overview of the Southern Aroostook Agricultural Museum. As you can see, it has a lot to offer for anyone from 5 to 105.